Hey guys, this is Tyler's take on spring scouting tips. I think spring is arguably one of, if not the best time of year to get out into the woods and start doing some scouting. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, let's get right into it. When it comes to whitetail deer hunting, a lot of guys tend to get into the woods and do their scouting. Some guys use July 4th weekend as like their go time to maybe start putting out cameras, which is around where I'll start to put cameras out. But the problem is a lot of guys tend to get out into the woods then to start their scouting. I would say the majority of guys don't start scouting, guys and girls. I would say don't start scouting till like August or September. And this is scouting deer that they're planning on hunting in October. So you're out in the woods in September and you're trying to find your hunting spots for October. And there's a couple reasons why that doesn't work. Really, the biggest reason why that doesn't work is because the deer you're seeing in the summer, the deer you're looking at in August and September, those deer are not going to be in that same place come October and November. The food is completely going to change. They're going to move from, eating summer mast and crops to moving to harder mast in the fall, like acorns and even the sticks and branches and greenery when food starts to get a little scarce. So that's going to totally shift their patterns. Where they're going to bed is going to totally shift. Things are nice and thick and green in the summer, and they can find a thick bedding area really anywhere. Well, when leaves start to fall and the greenery starts to die off in October and November, now they start to have to, look a little bit harder for those thick spots. So their bedding areas are going to move. And that's going to totally shift where those deer are located. If you have private land, you might see a beautiful deer herd full of big bucks in the summer. And then every October, you wonder where the heck they go. And sometimes people think, oh man, it's just because of hunting pressure. And that has something to do with it, I think. But a lot of times it's just because the habitat, just the environment itself has completely changed. Another reason why it doesn't do you a whole lot of, not that it's not good to scout in July, August, September, but if you do, man, no, it's hot, it's buggy, and it's hard to see what you're looking for in the summer. Like I said earlier, everything is super thick and it's super green, and you're bushwhacking through the woods to try to find these hunting spots, and it's hard to see. It's easy to miss good sign when you're trying to scout in the summer. It's really easy to conceal sign that was laid down in the prior year, or even sign that was just laid down. Things like scrapes and rubs, even those things that we're kind of attuned to seeing when we walk through the woods, they're a lot easier to miss in the summertime. So by going out in the woods this time of year, man, number one, if you watched any of my last couple of videos, we talked about shed hunting. Well, it's end of March here, and it's go time for shed hunting. I mean, by now, most of the bucks have dropped their antlers. So get out in the woods and start doing some shed hunting. And while you're doing that, you can do some scouting. If you get out there now, everything is still completely bare. The leaves are off of the trees. It's not thick. There's not any of that ground growth going on. And it's so much easier to see sign that was laid down this past fall right now than it will be in the summertime. Not only is it more fresh, but it's because the canopy is so open right now, it's so easy to see that. So before you just go walking into the woods though, I think it's important to understand what to look for. Obviously, if you're going in to go shed hunting, hey, go shed hunting, look for some sheds. And while you're doing that, kind of look for these things as well. But you should focus in on a couple areas. And the first thing, the biggest thing is you need to have a plan and know what to look for. The first thing I would look for when I'm going into the woods is I would try to focus on finding or identifying bedding areas. I mean, it's one of the hardest things to find in the summertime and in the fall is, where deer bedding. And because again, things are thick, deer are moving, but right now you can still identify those buck bedding areas or doe bedding areas that they were using in the fall because everything is cleared out. So you're looking for things like big depressions. If you had a snowfall, I mean, that's great. During the snow, you can see where they were bedding. You got to be careful though, because sometimes where they bed in the winter is different than where they bed in the fall. But if you're trying to focus on a bed that a deer is using in the fall, look for things like a bed that's in really thick cover, number one, and a bed, if it's a buck bed, you want to look at a bed that might have rubs and scrapes around it in the immediate area. So if you walk into a thick patch that you can identify as thick right now, you know it's going to be thick in October. So you find a thick area, you look what looks to be a bed, a depression, kind of matted down grass or leaves, and then you look around, and if you see some rubs or scrapes in the area, or you can also look for some hair in the area. Maybe you can find some tracks, and you're looking for big tracks if you're looking for a buck. If you can identify those things, then you can say, okay, boom, this is a bedding area that a buck was using in the fall during the rut, potentially. At least it was when he was, having those rut tendencies, like to be able to make those scrapes and rubs. So look for those bedding areas, and that's going to help you identify where to set up in the fall. The next thing, if you're looking for rubs are great. Everybody loves rubs. Nothing gets me more excited when walking through the woods when I see a big old rub. I mean, it's one of those things that's easy to see. You can point out to all your friends or your family if you're walking through the woods, like, oh man, look at that. But you need to understand what that rub means. So go through the woods, and if you come into a wide open area and you start seeing a bunch of rubs, maybe you see a scrape here or there. That to me, if it's in a wide open area, that to me tells me that this is an area that a buck was using during the rut. There's not a lot of cover. For some reason now, bucks, why the heck would a buck be in the middle of the open like this? Well, the only time they do that is during the rut. It draws them out into the open, and then they'll start to lay down sign. Remember, rubs, they lay down all the time, and a lot of them, so you can't trust that too much, but that could be a rut spot. Also take a look at, is this an open area inside of cover, or is this an open area right next to a road or right next to a field that people use? If that's the case, you probably identified an area that bucks are using at nighttime, and that's probably not an area I'd focus my time. So, kind of identifying the habitat or the area that these rubs are in will tell you, what time of year the bucks are using it, if it's in the rut, if it's in, if it's a communal scrape that they're using in the summer, something that they use all the time. Or is it an area that they're laying rut sign down at night when they feel safe versus during the day when they want to feel protected? Obviously, we're looking for spots that they're going to be moving in during the day. So I would tend to leave those spots out. So looking at what kind of habitat these rubs are in. Also, when you find a rub, rubs are, like I said, rubs are great. And sometimes you can see a big rub and you instantly think, man, this is a gigantic deer. Over the years, I've tended to focus less on how big the rub is and more on how high the rub is. So how high off the ground, I think, is a better indicator to tell me how big the deer is. So if I've got a rub really close to the ground, but it's really big and worn down, it might be a younger buck that's doing it, and he's just using it a lot. And he's really rubbing into that, gouging into that tree. But if I get a rub that's high off the ground, a young buck's not standing up on his hind legs to make that rub. That tells me it's a bigger deer. So that's what I would look at. Also, if you have a big tree here and then you have smaller trees behind it, if you see rubs on the big tree and also on the trees right behind it, or maybe saplings or something behind it, that tells me that the antlers are that big to where they're touching the tree behind it when he's rubbing the tree in front. So that's something else to look out for. Next thing we love to see in the deer woods is scrapes. Obviously, deer lay down scrapes all year round, and even does will tend scrapes just like bucks will. But here's where I'm trying to identify again when these scrapes were made. Like the rubs, is this a scrape that is in the middle of the open next to a rub line? Okay, it's probably a rut scrape. Is it in cover? Is it in the open? Is it working at night or working it during the day? If it's in thick cover, next to that bed, that's probably a scrape that he's using during the day when he feels safe. That's going to be a hot one to hunt, and we'll get into hunting bedding areas in another video, but that's, if you can do that, props to you, but it's tricky. But how big is the scrape? Is it a large scrape in an area where there's a bunch of trails, and is it still being used right now in March? If that's the case, it's probably some type of communal scrape that's used all year round. And it's probably used by more than just bucks. Or is it a smaller scrape that you can tell is a scrape now, but you can tell it really hasn't been used? That to me tells me it's probably a scrape that was used by bucks, in the fall, maybe the second rut in the winter, somewhere in there. That might be a scrape I might tune into a little bit more. Just kind of, and also judging by the other sign that's around that scrape. Next to scrapes, the next thing I would focus on is trails. If it, where you are, if it's still snowing and snow melting right around this time, it's a great time to find trails. It's really easy to see deer trails in the snow or when the snow starts to melt. But even when it's not, you want to identify trails and what kind of trails they are. So if it's a super heavy, beaten down trail, I'm not going to say bucks aren't using that trail, because they probably are. But to me, when I see a gigantic trail, that screams doe herd. There's a bunch of does moving together all year round, and they're using that trail. The trails that I like to find are smaller trails that aren't as easily noticed, that are along edges of habitat or along thick cover or food. Those smaller trails will tell me that's probably a buck, because bucks are, in the fall at least, they tend to they move by themselves. So you're not going to find this big, gigantic, beaten down trail. Typically, what I see, and it may change in your area or be different, but I might have a bedding area, or I might have a food source. All right. And then just off of that food source, I might have a big, heavy, beaten trail. All right, that tells me there's does probably using that right along the food source. Well, just behind that heavy beaten trail, that's where I'm going to start to look for these smaller trails. And if I see something like that, it's probably going to be in an area that's a little bit thicker. Maybe it's on a slope that slopes down a little bit. They're going to have a little bit more cover. If I see that trail that's not as big, not as heavily used, that to me says, okay, this is a buck trail. The does are getting nice and close and tight to the open food source, whether it's a field or an ag field or whatever it is. And then the does or the bucks are going to be in a little bit thicker cover. So that's something to look for when it comes to trails. Also, right now, when it comes to trails, I'm looking for trails that come together. So if I ever get to a spot where I see a bunch of trails and they all kind of converge into one spot, well, number one, it tells me there's a lot of deer that are going to be, that I have a high chance of seeing deer if I sit in this spot. So nobody likes to sit in the woods and not see deer. Sometimes I'm like, you know what, screw it. I don't feel like sitting in the woods and not seeing anything. I might go to a spot like this. Yeah, maybe I see a bunch of does, but at least I'll see something. So if I have a spot like that, a bunch of trails coming together, hey, that tells me there's a lot of deer moving through this area. There's probably a reason for it, which we can get into why those trails are converging there, but you can read the terrain around it to determine why. But if I've got a camera with me right now, man, sometimes right now you're willing to walk farther than you are in the summer, or, just after the hunting season when you're super tired. So if I've got like a cell camera or something, I might walk super far in and find a spot like that and be like, man, that's a good bang for your buck. So that's a spot that I'm going to hang a trail camera on. Cause right now I could hang a cell camera there, and I'm looking for if I'm hunting public land, are there bucks using this area? Are there bucks in this area? And that's an area where I can get a lot of data from a lot of deer, and they can tell me, okay, what kind of deer am I looking for in the area? And then once I identify there are bucks there, I can start to hone in on exactly where they're going, where they're coming from, stuff like that. So that's definitely an area that I would focus on. Outside of that, really the last bit of advice, and it's not really so much advice on what to do, but kind of what not to do. Sometimes, guys are starting to feel the itch. Turkey season's around the corner. We've kind of, licked our wounds and rested up a little bit from the deer season already. And the temperature's starting to break, and we're, ready to get back in the woods. Guys are like, oh man, I'm going to find my next stand spot. Or if you have private land, maybe you have a stand with you and you're going to hang your next set. I would advise against identifying stand locations right now. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The caveat here would be if you have private land. If you have private land, by all means, identify this sign and identify a spot where you can hang a stand, because you can trim lanes and you can keep that area trimmed all summer long. Public land, you don't really have the ability to trim shooting lanes and keep an area trimmed down all summer long. So what'll happen is you'll find a super sweet spot right now, and it's like, oh, that stand, that tree right there will be perfect. But then what happens now? You come back in August or September and it is so thick, it's so overgrown, you can't see anything below it. And now you're like, oh, I found my spot in March. I don't have to come back until September. And now you're like, oh man. And now you're scrambling trying to find another stand location. So I would hold off on that. Wait till the canopy really thickens up and greens up so you can see what it's going to look like. And then you can identify where these stand locations are going to be. Maybe that means you have to push off the trails a little bit more than you want to, or find another spot on the trail. So that's something I would advise against. But outside of that, man, it's a great time to get into the woods. I don't know about you, but this is like, we go through that weird, it's bitter cold winter. And then all of a sudden it's 75 degrees outside and you go through this like big, but here in Pennsylvania, at least, you go through this big fake out, which we just had. So, 1 week it's 20 degrees outside and then it's 75 degrees. You're like, oh, spring's here. And then this morning when I wake up, it's 15 degrees with the wind chill. And then you slip back into winter. But you start to get these spurts of nice temperatures. So get outside, get into the woods, find some sheds, do some scouting for turkey. But identify those spots for deer now, because the data that you find right now is going to help you out big time when you get into the woods this fall. So hopefully this helps. We'll talk more about kind of reading and identifying these spots. I want to do a video identifying these spots from a map and kind of using like, why do these trails intersect? Why do bucks use this area? So we'll get into that. And obviously we got some turkey videos coming, and then after turkey, it's fishing time. So I hope you guys are doing well, and until next time.